Again, welcome back. Let's continue our exploration of SwiftUI, and I'm sitting in the squeaky chair today. Anyway, in the last video, we explored making buttons, and we used the H-stack embedded within the V-stack to create rows in a set of columns, right, or in a single column. Let's take a look at the calculator for a moment. So, here's the calculator app on on the desktop. On the phone, it's got circular buttons, right? But it looks more or less like this, right? And the arrangement of the buttons here is in, columns and rows again, right? So this is a perfect example to explore and master the V stack and the H stack. Like if you can arrange a bunch of views in an H stack and a V stack like this, then you've got H stacks and V stacks down. You got stacks down, okay? So so this looks pretty good. Let's talk about the buttons for a minute, right? All these buttons are basically the same, okay? Or they're very similar. There's a couple things that are different, okay? Every button is basically the same. It's a rectangle or a circle on iOS, right? It's got a label. They're all the same label, they're all white text. It's about the same size text, right? Then what's different, right? Well, the 0 is wider, right? So this one's wider. And then this group of buttons is gray, this is dark gray, and that's orange. Otherwise, they're all the same. You may have noticed when you created your, when we created these two buttons and then I said, oh, make another row, right? Your code is getting pretty long because every, button you create is basically a like in our case, these buttons are, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. They're like 7, 8 lines of code long. So that's a pretty big block of code, right? So how do we make reusable code also? And then we're duplicating a lot of stuff here, right? So this basically is the same. It's exactly the same as what I have here, except for the color. Okay, right? And actually, this whole thing is the same, except for the color and the label, right? And then, if I wanted to make like that 0 button, let's get that calculator again. Like if I wanted to make the 0 button here, then everything, if this was one of these buttons here, everything would be the same except that, the width would be different, right? So there's just a couple things that change here, right? So what can we do? Well, anytime we have code that we reuse, we make a function, right? So that's our best, oops, I deleted that, right? That's our best strategy, right? So notice that we've got a struct here. So, and the struct begins here and it ends down at the bottom here, right? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to add a function to my struct. So I'm going to call this make button. Oops, not wait. Why does it do that to me? Okay, I'm going to call this make button. And then there's my function, right? Okay. Why did it tab all that stuff? There we go, right? So that's where I want that, right? So I think because I set my tab spacing to 2 spaces, and then Xcode likes 4 spaces. So closure containing declaration. I feel like I should be able to put this here. Maybe I deleted a bracket somewhere. Let me undo that. Hold on. So let me do button here. I feel like I'm missing, I lost a bracket. I think that's why it did it. Okay, sorry. There we go. Okay. So anyway, so I got my function here, and what I want to do is I want a function that returns a button, right? So it's basically going to return a configured button, okay? So, we didn't write the button class or the button struct, whatever they're using here, but we can, we can kind of make a creator function that creates a configured version of this, right? So let's try that, right? So this needs to return and this is like a little weird here. So I'm going to put some view, okay? So this is going to be some kind of view, okay? Right? Not necessarily, one specific kind of view. For some reason, like I feel like we should be able to return button, but in SwiftUI land, it doesn't like that, and I got to do some view, right? I tried that earlier and it didn't seem to work for me. So then I'm gonna take, and then this was another thing that I found was weird, and I couldn't quite explain it, but I couldn't just return a configured button here. I had to wrap it in this any view. And so that's like I said, I'm new to SwiftUI, so I didn't quite, I couldn't quite wrap my head around that. I got to look it up and read a little bit more about it. Okay, but from here, if I set my function up to return some view, and then I return any view, and I wrap a button inside this any view here, then that seemed to work pretty good. So what I'm going to do is actually, let's just copy this button right here, and I'm going to use it inside the any view. Well, maybe, let me see, what if I do this? What if I just configure my button the way we did earlier, right? Just so we can write it all from scratch, right? So I'll do any view, I got button here. Maybe I'll even add a line return there and tab this once here. There we go, right? Just trying to make this read well, okay? So I've got my label here, it says button on it, and then I'm going to return that button, right? And what I want to do is I want to use this button over here. So maybe I'll get rid of this, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to type self.makeButton, right? And then it'll expect a button. Let me refresh my view here. Oh yeah, so there's my button right there, right? So that's the one that's returned here. This one doesn't have any configuration, so I'm going to borrow some of this configuration here and then configure my button so that it has, the frame and the background color and all this stuff, right? So let's do that. So remember, this all the styling I did on the text label. So that really what we're seeing here is the text label, and the button is just kind of invisible, just surrounding it, right? So let's do text.frame, and we'll do, actually let me get the code hints here to help me. So I'll choose width, height, and alignment. What did we do? We did width of 140. Let's do width of, I don't know, 70, and height of 70 for now. And then we can do alignment center. So now I got a 70 by 70 button. And then let's do background color of color dot, I think those buttons in, I think there's actually a dark gray secondary. Maybe it's like gray. Second, I guess they don't have a dark gray. Maybe I'll do gray there. Oh, there's our gray button, right? And then we'll do corner radius of, so the height is 70 and the width is 70, so the corner radius better be like 35, right? And that'll be half the height and width, so we get a circle. And let's do font, and then we'll do dot system. Let's do, I did 24. I think that looked pretty good. I'm going to do 24 here, right? And then we'll do the foreground color, okay? So I'm going to do foreground color, and let's do white as the color, right? So I've got white there, and now my, I got a button, right? So let's imagine like I want to get rid of this cancel button right here, and I just want to use my make button function in place. So actually now I can reduce or collapse all this code down to self.makeButton, okay? So that's working pretty good, right? We're using functions to help us, right? So in our horizontal stack, if I was making the calculator, I would have maybe, let's get our calculator again, I'd have 4 buttons across most of the time. This is an exception right here, right? But I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, right? So, so let's do that. Let's take a couple more of these, or one more, right? So now I got 4 buttons in this row. Here's this first horizontal stack here. Let's get rid of all this, and let's also put 4 buttons up here. So I feel like that's looking pretty good. Like I like the look of this code. It's easy for me to see what's going on. Okay. So and you know, you could get trickier here, right? So let's try it, right? So I like this, but where it says button 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 is not good, right? We should be able to pass in the text that we see, right? So let's use functions to our advantage. So functions take parameters and they let us tell the function how to do what it's supposed to do. So I'm going to add a value here to button. So let's put, let's call it text. Is that a good name? Or maybe label or title? Yeah, let's do title. And title will be a string. And I'm going to just put a default value of 0 in there, okay? And then I'm putting the default here because if I leave that off, then all of these will throw an error because they'll say, hey, you didn't include the title, right? So that way, if I just want to make the 0, but put a 0 everywhere, it'll be easier to do it like this, right? So now the title string, let's use that. Actually, you can figure this out. Where would we put that to display the 0 in every button here? Okay, so why don't we put it here inside the button text, right? So I'm going to put title here, right? And then it looks like this thing stopped rendering again. So I'm going to click resume there. Oh, there we go. So there we got all our buttons, right? So now maybe here I'm going to make, let's go look at that calculator again. So what is it? It's like 7, 8, 9, 4, 5, 6, 1, 2, 3, 0. Okay. So let's imagine that this is the second to the top row, because the top row is actually those just AC and plus minus and percent. It's like a bunch of options, right? But we'll do the 7, 8 row. So what do I got to do here? Let's do title, and then we need a string. So we'll do 7, and then over here I'll do title, and I'll do 8. Oh yeah, there we go. So now I can see 7 and 8 there. And now let's add the 9 in here. So we'll do title colon 9, right? And then the last button here, I think it's the multiply button. So I'm just going to put the X in there. Should be uppercase X. I feel like there is an emoji on the emoji. I went to edit menu and I chose emojis and symbols, right? Let me actually take that out of there and I'll choose edit emojis and symbols. And I feel like there should be like a mathematical symbol for multiply in here, but I feel that's not it, right? It's like, that looks like the X, right? You know, like not or close or, you know, removed, right? Let me go to the bottom. I think all the math symbols are in here. I think I looked in here earlier and I couldn't find multiply, but I feel like it should be here. So what do we have? What do I got here? That's looking mathy. What do we got here? These are looking kind of cryptic, but not what I'm looking for. Wow, they have like all the mahjong tiles. That's crazy. Those are like the 2 swords. I want to do the swords. Is that it? I feel like that's not quite right. These are looking pretty good. Pretty mathy. I don't know, man. I couldn't find it. Well, tell me if you can find it. I'm curious, right? What is the symbol for the X? I'm just going to put the X back in there just to keep us moving, right? But anyway, so there's our X, right? So that's pretty good. What we'd like to do now is also maybe have some more parameters here, right? So what I did in my earlier example is I used, and if you'll notice on that one, I did the button here. I made it like a little bit wider, right? So I gave it a width and a height, so you could set the width and height. And then I also gave it another value for something else. I forget what else, but what I hadn't gotten to, but that I wanted to do was also to set a value for the color, right? So that way we could make each one like a different color if we wanted, right? Okay. So I'm going to leave that up to you to try and solve on your own, and then I'll cover it in the next video, okay? So your goal right now is to try and create all the buttons on the calculator and configure them so they look like this as much as you can, or as close as you can get, okay? And if you come up with a different solution than what I had here, that's fine too, okay? I like my solution, but it's not the only solution. There's plenty of different options, okay? So I used a function to generate a configured button to save me a lot of code, and that kind of made it easier. Of course, now I have to configure those buttons, right? So, if you think of another solution, that's okay too. Okay, and thanks for watching.